So the next film we're going to review is One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King. Jim, tell us a little bit about this film.
So this one's been kicking around on the festival circuit for a while, and basically what it is it documents, as the title would indicate, one night in Miami, and it follows four major figures in Black American history, let's say. And the people that it focuses on are Malcolm X, the at the time Cassius Clay, because this is before Muhammad Ali's joining of the Nation of Islam, and that's kind of a central point in the film. Actually, is his relationship to that, along with Malcolm X's, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke. And basically, it takes place after one of Clay at the time's fights. And it's very much kind of a chamber piece, largely, with the odd exception, taking place in a motel room. And it's basically, it's based on a stage play, right? I'm right in saying that, yeah. And basically, which goes to explain the setting somewhat. But basically, it's these four men exchanging their views about what they are representing and fighting for in the civil rights movement of the time, how they are seen and perceived, and how they are treated in American society at the time. And I'll leave it there for the moment because I'm interested to see what people think of it. I think this is one of these films where it could easily have ended up very, very staid and one note, and I don't think it is. I think it's extremely well done by Regina King. I think she uses space and angles really well to add momentum and import to the interactions that these men have. I think the acting performances are really good in the sense that nobody here is doing an impersonation. It's nobody who's trying to ape kind of the memory of these men. And the way that they play off each other, not just in terms of like the chemistry of the performances, I think they're very good, but also in what they choose to talk about, and it never feels forced or on the nose to me. And I really got into it, and I think it got across something important but also engaging. So I'll leave it there because I think there's actually plenty to talk about with this one. And we'll maybe start off with Mark, like what you found and how you thought the film went.
Sure thing. So on the nature of it as a play, first of all, because it's Kent Powers who has done the screenplay of his own play, which seems to be a variation. It's two things at once. It's a variation on Tom Stoppard's play Travesties, which is a bunch of significant people in a single setting. In this case, that idea is kind of animated by the fact of this photograph, which shows Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, and Sam Cooke all in the same room together, and the play is extrapolated from that image. I think it's Henry Cooper who Cassius Clay defeats, and the film then follows them back in their celebration to a hotel in Miami, and then they have these debates, which are mostly about cultural politics and the cultural politics of their positions as Black men in America. And I think primarily the contest is between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X because they have such divergent ideas about how to operate within the society as Black men. Malcolm X has antipathy towards everything in the society. He sees his position as oppositional, whereas Sam Cooke sees his as getting to the top of various industries, creative industries, and that being a way to express something which, in the course of the movie will be related to the civil rights movement. At first, I was thinking that the film was kind of constrained. There's this horrible moment in the beginning with Jim Brown in the South, which has a real sting in the tail. But up to the point where they get to the motel room, I was thinking that there's something a little bit constrained about it, up until the point where Cassius Clay has just won the fight, and there's a quick shot of Malcolm X's camera, and it's as though that there's a certain flatness in the staging of this. There's a certain constraint in the framing of it. And that quick shot is really important because this is all dramatically extrapolated from a photograph that Malcolm X took, or a photograph showing him taking a photo. And so it's like the whole of this moment is being seen through Malcolm X's viewfinder. And I thought that was a really neat dramatic moment, and it links directly to the final shot in the film, which is this like double mediation, and this reflection on the way that the media has a role in the creation of these images, and the images of these men, I should say. I think once you get into the hotel room, I think Jim's right. There's a lot of very creative decoupage. There's a lovely rhythm to the way that their arguments are playing out. Regina King is really good at finding a new angle, a new emotive angle on a certain person's argument. And although it's mostly between Sam Cooke and Malcolm X, and their performances are completely game and completely ready to be totally reactive to each other, and there's great interaction between scene partners here. I'm sort of thinking that the performance I appreciate most is actually Aldous Hodge as Jim Brown. He kind of stealth underacts everybody, but he's really, really good. He's kind of like the guide, because he's already been through these arguments, it seems. He's already had these conversations with himself about his position as a superstar who's moving to Hollywood, as a football player, American football player who's kind of segueing into a Hollywood career. He's already had these arguments internally. He knows the same things that Sam Cooke is going through. And so he kind of like moves sort of adjacent, but at key moments interacting with the other two. I will say that there are three performances which are excellent, and one I think is lacking, unfortunately. And that's Eli Goree as Cassius Clay, because I think there are 3 acts of like actually inhabitation happening around him. And then I'm going to disagree with you slightly, Jim. I do think that's just a very a serviceable impersonation, I think. I don't think it's a great performance, but also in the course of the film, it isn't actually that important, because he is like his event is the one which frames the story of the film, but he's actually kind of sidelined in the discussions because it's about him joining the Nation of Islam. But he is kind of just at the side listening to the debates. He does have a moment where he in the car outside the liquor store, which is important, but in comparison with the other performances, which are so controlled and so inhabited, he does seem just to have just a slightly less, slightly lower levels of reassurance in his own acting when compared to the other 3, which is, it's a light limitation, but I think it is there.
I'll come back to that, but we'll
Sure.
we'll see what Amanda thinks first.
Well, I rather agree with both of you. I mean, I think again, we talked a lot about this idea of like translating theater into a film, and especially when they're in this kind of like insular space and like one room plays, and I think this was like artfully done, and I think it was quite beautiful. It wasn't something I had known about, and it definitely, I think, creatively is it's in a piece of in its own. I mean, it obviously got me really interested in the stories of these 4 people and what happened like shortly thereafter, given that the next day, as the film shows, Cassius Clay changes his name and joins, but then all, the quote at the end and sort of like prefaces what was to happen for all of them going in the future. But overall, I think the film is really well structured. It's very beautiful, and I thought most of I thought the acting, I didn't really pinpoint the Cassius Clay character not being as good as the others. I thought they all were fairly even, but I hear your point. It definitely didn't seem like his which was obviously could or should, and again, that's probably the source material, that he wasn't the most, it was an important night for him for many reasons, and so but it didn't seem like that was as big of a part of the story. But overall, I really liked the film, and I suppose I wasn't expecting to as much, because it's but I really did. So I'll
just to pick up on the Eli Goree Cassius Clay. I think what I will say is I think the other three, I will concede that the other three performances are stronger, I think. And the way in which I would take that is they are more memorable. But I think to a certain extent, I think the film is set up for it to be that way. I wouldn't say I found the performances Clay lacking, but he kind of acts the role in this story that has been kind of created from that photo. He kind of acts as a lightning rod for a lot of the concerns of the other men, right? Because one of the key clashes is, or one of the main points of tension, let's say, is Malcolm X's kind of fracturing relationship at the time with the Nation of Islam. And particularly, you know, there's references made to the way that Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the nation, lives and things like that. And I think that the way that these characters all bounce off one another, to me, captures really well this idea that, you know, movements are not a homogenous entity, right? There's a very different set of opinions within about what is the best way to advance a cause. One thing I'm definitely going to agree with 100% with you is Aldous Hodge's Jim Brown. I think he really does kind of like fly under you know, it's the least showy performance, right, as well as part of it, right? Because obviously, like, you know, the performance as Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, like the man was so kind of flamboyant in his kind of use of language as it was, right? It's very hard for that to not come through in the film or to have a restrained performance as him, particularly in this context. And I think the most memorable performance is probably going to be Kingsley Benadir's Malcolm X, right? And I think he also gets kind of most of the screen time that doesn't take place in the motel room, right, when we're referring to other instances. But the glue that kind of holds a lot of these interactions together is Aldous Hodge's Jim Brown. And it's not the first time Aldous Hodge has done this, right? I mean, I'm fairly new to his work, but I would argue he did exactly the same thing in another film that we reviewed on the show, in Clemency, right, where it's very much a supporting role, but he does that same thing where it's a very strong performance that holds a lot of things together, but it's not a very showy one. But he deserves enormous credit for, you know, actually kind of allowing the film to revolve around him, because there's the main confrontation, as Mark says. I think the main tension point is between Leslie Odom Jr., Sam Cooke, and Malcolm X, as played by Kingsley Benadir. But the way that they kind of tease out less heated moments about what these men's opinions and feelings are about the way that the other men in the group are acting and what they represent, the way they tease that out is through conversations with Aldous Hodge's Jim Brown. And I think it's a good performance, but also the script and the way it's been filmed kind of constructs that really well, and it flows really very well. I think to compare it with another stage adaptation, which covers some similar themes that we did on the last show, in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I think we were all very keen on, but for me, this is the more skillfully constructed film for me. There's plenty to commend the performances of the other film, and it is a good film. I think we all agreed about that. But for me, in terms of taking that stage setup, you know, this single location, these group of people interacting, for me, this is the one which is paced and constructed a little bit more skillfully for me, and I think the film goes to a level above that one as a result of it.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I was wrong on the fight. I think the first fight, which takes place in the opening, is with Henry Cooper. It's then Sonny Liston, which is the big fight, which they're celebrating the result of afterwards. And I was just thinking about their contests, which I think are sort of the heart of the film, and it relates to this idea that they're trying to like provoke each other over the course of like actually disagreeing with each other. It's as though the contest is motivated by real love that they share, particularly between Cooke and Malcolm X. There's like this real, although they like disagree over methods and they disagree over each other's position, it's as though they're trying to provoke each other into greatness. Yeah. And towards the ending of the film, you see that like that has been kind of secured in a way, and it's sort of relates to a Ralph Waldo Emerson line, which is that truly speaking, it is not instruction but provocation that I can receive from another soul, and that the way that the film is structured sort of like teases that line's significance out for the film.
All right, so One Night in Miami is currently on Amazon Prime, so check it out if you can.